Good afternoon and a warm welcome to parents, carers and potential Year 6, Year 7 students, hopefully with us next September. I'm Mr. Daly, I'm one of the assistant principals, and I'll be kind of hosting this webinar this afternoon on how we support at St Michael's every student, and particularly those students with SEND needs. The kind of running format for this afternoon will be, you'll be hearing very shortly just a brief introduction from our head teacher, Ms. Corcoran. We'll just be welcoming you. And then you'll come back to me very briefly and I'll hand over to Ms. Freegard, who kind of looks after our inclusion team. And she'll be doing a short presentation on kind of the SEND department. As I said, how we support every student to make sure they fulfill their potential. And at the end of that, you'll come back to me and I will then answer some questions. Thank you for the questions that have been sent in by parents and carers. Feel free to use the chat facility if you've got any questions that come up that you may feel haven't been answered. We'll do our best to answer them, and then I'll give you a little bit of information about where you can find this information. We understand that quite a lot to take in on a Monday afternoon, but just where you can find this information and a few kind of tips going forward. Right, so I'm going to hand over to Mrs. Corcoran now. Thank you.
Hi there and welcome to another one of our webinars. We're doing this as part of our open days this year, so parents and carers can find out more about St Michael's, particularly specific aspects that they may be interested in. And the webinar today is about how we support every student at St Michael's to achieve their potential. And Ms. Freegard, our SEN and inclusion lead, is going to talk to you more about that today. So thank you for joining us. We hope you'll find this useful.
Thank you, Ms. Corcoran. Yes, with no further ado, I'm going to hand over to Ms. Freegard. She's been a long-standing member of the college community, aren't you, Ms. Freegard? A bit like myself, and we're 20-year servers already, and hopefully here for many years to come. Thank you, Ms. Freegard.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm head of SEN and inclusion here at St Michael's, and I'm going to give you a little insight into how we try and work hard to meet the needs of our SEND students here at St Michael's. Next slide, please. So, some statistics. Currently, we have 200 students on our special educational needs list. So that is equivalent to just under a quarter of all of our students. 22 of these students have an education and healthcare plan. And this means that these children have particularly complex needs. And many of our students on an EHCP are on the ASC spectrum. Our current staff team is particularly experienced in supporting our ASC students. And currently we have a staff team of 8. Next slide, please. So, how do we meet the needs of even our students with the most complex needs? Well, our starting point is quality first teaching. Our starting point is what goes on in our mainstream classroom and what is actually delivered by our mainstream teachers. This basically means that we aim to provide high quality inclusive teaching in the mainstream classroom. We don't look at removing children from class. We need them to be in the mainstream class, gaining access to the knowledge and expertise of our mainstream teachers. The teaching includes the highest possible expectations of your child, and it's teaching that builds on what they might already know, understand, and can do to help them gain confidence and engagement. All lessons are differentiated, ensuring that your child will be able to access the lesson content and be fully engaged in their lesson. So differentiation is the key, ensuring that our students can access the full curriculum. Next slide, please. Obviously, some children have more specialist needs than others, and we seek to find specialist support when we need. If your child has complex SEN needs, then we will look at sharing specific strategies to help meet those needs And if possible and if necessary, there will be an in-class teaching assistant. The department will also work very hard with outside agencies to design and deliver specialist interventions, including work around speech and language and difficulties in ASC. Provision for SEND students involves a continuous process of assessing their needs, planning an intervention, doing the intervention, and then reviewing it, seeing if it works. And at all times, the young person is at the center of everything we do to ensure the best possible outcomes for your child. So your child might have complex special needs, but our job is to ensure that they gain access to the full curriculum and that they enjoy and achieve the best outcomes possible. Back to you, Mr. Daly.
Thank you, Ms. Freegard. Thanks for that overview, that kind of brief overview of the SEND department and how we support students across the college. I thank you again, as I said, to parents and carers for the questions that you sent in. Ms. Freegard, I'm going to kind of field some of the questions for you. Some of them you kind of answered in the presentation, but we'll kind of just go through them. Thank you. If you've got any questions, as I said, please feel free to just put those in the chat facility. You kind of answered, how does this all support children who may need that extra support inside of lessons or outside of lessons? So
when they arrive with us at the beginning of year 7, we carry out some of our own assessments. So we do a reading comprehension test of all our new year 7s. We carry out cognitive ability tests. We do some subject-based tests, and we look at data from primary schools. We then look at where your child is at, and we ensure that they are put in the most appropriate class to meet their actual needs. And again, as I said before, the priority, the starting point is quality first teaching. All research shows that it is far better for a child with SEN to be in the mainstream classroom, getting access to mainstream teaching. That is the best way of achieving the best outcomes. If they need more specialist support, then we start talking about TA support, we start talking about specific strategies, and we talk about liaising with outside agencies. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Freegard. So a whole range of kind of strategies at the beginning to support children and see where they're at in terms of their ability. And then, as you said, embedding the teaching within every lesson to make sure that every student gets to that point where they're achieving success. The questions are quite varied, Ms. Freegard.
That's fine.
Picking them up as they come in. I've got one here about autism and how do we support students with autism, and in what ways do we do that if we do?
So quite a lot of our autistic students are incredibly bright. They are very, very high functioning, and there are no issues with their cognition. These are the sorts of children that can explain how to take a steam engine apart and put it back together again. But that doesn't mean to say they don't need support. So what we do is we run a social club at lunchtime for ASC students who might struggle a bit out in the playground, might become overstimulated or overwhelmed. We provide social stories, background and work to try and help with reciprocal and expressive language difficulties. And we also advocate very strongly for our ASC students and ensure that they are involved in all activities across the school. And we also are aware of the fact that as these children get older, they sometimes experience emotional difficulties. And so we have a part-time counsellor, but we also have learning mentors that can work specifically with our ASC students, helping them to work out where they're coming from and how to move forward. Thank you.
Kind of related to what you kind of said that briefly. A really pertinent question. How many TAs do we have in at school?
We have 6 currently, and we are hoping to get an extra one. What we tend to do is we've got quite a good scheme in that We often we always recruit graduates who are possibly thinking about going into teaching or educational psychology. They do a year or two with us as TAs and then progress on to further training. So we do have, I have to say, a highly educated, very hardworking, and very effective team of TAs. I think our children are very fortunate.
Yes, I would agree. You said in your presentation that we've got, I think, 200 pupils who have some kind of SEND need. Have you got any kind of success stories of students?
So one of our year 13 pupils who had slow processing and quite considerable health issues has managed to get a place at Cambridge for this year, which is quite a success story. Over half of all of our SEND pupils achieved grade 9 to 4 in their GCSE English and Maths. And we had a number of pupils who exceeded their targets in 5 or 6 subjects last year. So I think it's all about our young people with SEND having a positive attitude, knowing that they can succeed, supporting them to ensure that they succeed, and then they are able to progress at 16 plus onto A level, BTEC, whatever. Sorry about that.
Irrespective of their kind of starting point, a kind of, from the examples you've given, every student here can go beyond to end up at Cambridge as a success story for a individual, particularly one who's coming potentially with some kind of SEND needs at the beginning, but managed to really achieve great success. Perfect. Another question, thank you for this one. Obviously not so pertinent in year 7, but for SEND students posting key examination points at year 11, what support do we offer?
So what will happen for year 10 and year 11 is initially when they choose their options, they will get an extra English and Maths lesson a week, including an hour of study support, which is all about preparing them the best way possible for their examinations. There are homework clubs, there are study support clubs, and of course, I'm the one responsible for testing all of our key stage 4 pupils to see if they qualify for access arrangements. And most of our SEND pupils will qualify for extra time, 25% extra time, a reader, and some children will qualify for a scribe. And we find that by ensuring that they get the access arrangements they need, this makes it a bit more of a level playing field when they sit their public exams. But a lot of time and energy goes into ensuring that these pupils have the best shot at the public examination system.
Do we have, this is a really good question, do we have a buddy system or mentoring program for students who might need extra support? Or?
So I think in terms of our pastoral teams, using the buddies is something we use right across the school, not just for SEND pupils, but all sorts of pupils. We have a mentoring program where our sixth formers may be buddied up with one of our SEN students to help them familiarise themselves with the environment, to help them feel confident, and also as a role model that, you know, some of our best sixth form mentors are also SEN pupils, and they are a success story, and they can give our little ones a helping hand and make them feel more confident.
Excellent, thank you. Yes. This question, you touched on it in your presentation. Which agencies, how closely do we work with agencies outside of St Michael's, and what times?
We take this very seriously, especially with our children, pupils with, quite complex needs. We work very, very closely with our speech and language therapist. We work closely with our educational psychologist. We also work with the ASC team at Southwark, and we work very closely with CAMS that do the assessments for things like ADHD. We have good links with the Evelina Hospital that do the assessments for ASC. And we are very quick to ask for support from specialist outside agencies that can help support our pupils, because at times we do need extra help and support.
Excellent. And in terms of supporting parents, this is a really good question. How closely do we work with parents of students who have a SEND?
Our attitude to this is that we cannot possibly meet the needs of our SEND students without working very closely with our parents. You as the parent know your child better than anyone else. And often the key to success with putting the right provision in place and the right interventions in place is we'll invite parents in and we'll say, well, what do you find works with little man or lady at home? And often parents have some really good suggestions that we can then share with staff. They understand the needs of their children in a way that we never possibly can. And I think parents have to be, as well as the student, have to be put at the centre of any kind of assessment, intervention, review process. And so you will get a chance to contact and speak with the SEN team several times a year.
Excellent. Perfect. This question kind of slightly on a different team chat focus, but nevertheless very important. I think that my son or daughter may have SEND but not tested. Do we support with that? Can we help with that at all?
We can. So, as I said, we work hard at assessing where we think your child is at when they first arrive with us. We then monitor our SEN pupils quite closely. There's a data drop 3 times a year. We'll check, are they making progress? And if they're not, well, why aren't they? What are the barriers to their learning? And there's a degree of testing we can do inside school to a certain extent. We can test for processing speed, for handwriting speed, those sorts of things. We can get an indication that there is some sort of special educational need, but then we know who to refer on to if we think it's something like ASC or ADHD or there's an emotional and behavioural difficulty. So we can get a pretty clear idea ourselves within school that something's not quite as it should be, and then we know who to refer on to if we need a full diagnosis.
How do the school, in terms of the students here, how would you say from your perspective? And
I have to say, our children are absolutely brilliant. They take everything in their stride, and I like to think that it's the Catholic ethos of the school that means that our pupils are caring and that they accept each other for who they are. I've heard absolute horror stories of things that happen to children with SEND in other schools. Hand on heart, I can tell you that they are accepted and they're seen as part of the community. And I think our SEND children do very, very well because they get to mix with all of the children and get involved in all of the same activities.
Thank you. So the students here, I think, work kind of it's a real collaborative approach, and they communicate with each other, do they? And they don't differentiate in that way, which, as you said, potentially you might find in a different environment. They're very caring, I find, our pupils here on the whole, aren't they, Ms. Freegard?
Very caring, really good.
Lovely. This is an interesting one. Supporting students with language difficulties.
Right. So we buy in speech and language therapist who comes in every 3 weeks, and the speech and language therapist will do one-to-one work with students. She will do small group work, but she also works at training our TAs so that they are taught techniques which they can then use with specific students with speech and language difficulties, focusing on things like developing reciprocal speech, expressive language, all of those sorts of areas. So we have a number of students who do have speech and language difficulties, but sort of by the end of towards key stage 4 time, a lot of those difficulties have improved considerably, and they're not quite so much of a barrier to learning. But we do take that very seriously. And as I said, we work very closely with our speech and language therapist.
Fantastic, lovely. This question, thank you for this one that's been sent in. Do we have smaller class sizes for students who need support?
Yeah, so in each year group, we have what we call our A group, and we will have 15 students in that group. So it's a very small class size. And certainly at Key Stage 3, there will be at least one TA providing support, if not two, for most lessons. So there is immediately a much higher staff to pupil ratio, and we think that that's absolutely necessary to ensure that our SEND students have full access to the curriculum.
Another question has come in. Strategies, talking a little bit more about in the classroom. What strategies do we use to support SEND students? And
the visual strategies.
Visual strategies, yeah.
Yeah. So all staff are encouraged to use visual strategies to help all sorts of students. Some of our students are visual learners. Some of our students might struggle with literacy. And so everyone is encouraged to use things like spider diagrams, flow diagrams, mind maps. There's always a PowerPoint. There's usually lots of photographs, lots of drawings, lots of pictures to help enhance our SEND students and their understanding of what they're learning in class. I know for my son, when he was little and he's severely dyslexic, he said pictures and diagrams was something that really helped him access what was going on. So we do encourage all staff to use those sorts of strategies. Thank you.
Another question here. Do we offer any counselling for students who might need support in that area?
So we're very, very fortunate. We have a trainee school counsellor who is in 3 days a week. She's kept very busy, and she is here available to our students, all students. But we also have a team of mentors, and that means that's adult mentors who are also trained in providing a sort of lower level emotional support to our students if they are struggling. We take that very, very seriously. We have a whole team, and the SEN and inclusion team act as a secure base for students that might be struggling.
Thank you. And this is for potential year 7 students. I can imagine in year 6 now, some slightly raised levels of anxiety, thinking about coming to secondary school and change environment. What support do we offer?
So what we do is, if we've got a little one coming and they're very anxious, so I had one this year, and I don't know whether it was mommy and daddy that were anxious or whether it was their daughter, but we invited her in to have a look around the school at a quieter moment in time. We do transition meetings with primary schools. We do an induction day in July, which I hope will be face-to-face this year. And then we run a summer school. And all of these interventions are put in place to try and allay any anxieties that our new year 7s may be feeling, because it is a massive transition and it should never be underestimated. But usually we find that within a couple of days or so, children settle very quickly, they're gaining confidence, and their anxieties disappear. If, of course, they remain and they continue to be a problem, then we've got all sorts of interventions and staff that we can put in place to help them manage that anxiety and normalise their experience at school.
Just to add on that, the summer school that we run, I think it's a real opportunity for our young students to come in, get a week in school. There are no other year groups in the school at that point. And even for the student feeling like really anxious, by the end of that first day or that week, you see that their kind of anxiety levels have gone down because they're familiar with the building. They know the teachers, they know where they're at, and that helps them to, when they come back in September. Also, when we come back in September, the year 7s come in on their own for a day still, just to make sure that kind of integration period is there for them in terms of making sure that they have a day just with them in the school, and the other year groups come back after that. So I think that works very well for all students, and particularly for our SEND students as well. Not too many more questions to go. Thank you again for the questions that you sent in. This one talking about kind of accessibility. Are all parts of the school accessible for children? Do we have a lift, etc., for any students that may need that?
Yeah, we have lifts. We have essentially the school is accessible. All parts of the school are accessible to any students that might have some sort of disability that might affect their mobility, their ability to get around. And I think also the way that the school is designed is that the children are always supervised. There's always a member of staff around and about supervising our children to ensure that they are safe and that they are happy.
A final question here, I think maybe slightly more subjective, but how happy would you say children are at St Michael's?
I am biased here, but I do believe that our children are, on the whole, very happy here at St Michael's. They all have their bad days, but I think particularly talking about our SEND and vulnerable children, I think it's an environment where they feel safe, where they feel valued, and where they feel they can thrive. And, you know, certainly myself and my team and also the rest of the school work very hard to ensure that our children have a really positive experience when they're in school, and that they are the centre of what the school is about and what we're trying to achieve.
Thank you for that, Ms. Freegard. I'd just like to add on that. I'm sure many parents and carers, you would have come in for our open mornings and evenings, or seen us on various webinars like this one. And you get a feel for a school, don't you, Ms. Freegard? You get a feel for an environment. Now, it's a very important choice. And I said this, I think myself and Ms. Ruggerputh and Ms. Horsborough, who went into many primary schools over the last few weeks to speak to you within your schools, that it's a choice that you have to make based on your feelings really, and what you think is best for your son or daughter. And I'd like to think that the students, adding to Ms. Freegard, are extremely happy here. It's a happy environment, it's an inclusive environment, it's a respectful environment, and we kind of work together in harmony with parents and carers to make sure that, as I've said already, all our students, children leave here being the best versions of themselves going forward into whatever that may be. Maybe that's sixth form with us, going on to higher level apprenticeships, or even into the world of work. And so hopefully we give them those tools to make sure that they're successful when they're embarking on that next stage of their life. Thank you very much, Thank you very much for that, Mrs. Freegard. And I hope parents and carers, that's been of use to you. Just a few things from me to summarize. All this information, I know it's quite a lot of information on a Monday afternoon, will be available on our website, and I'll be sending out by the end of the week a link to our Year 6 induction portal, where you'll have all of the kind of presentations that have happened so far. You'll have the head teachers or the principals' speech on there, and you'll be able to see, I know lots of you came in, but potentially some of you may not have been able to. You'll be able to see each department kind of showcasing what they do for our new Year 7 pupils and for the whole school community. So please feel free to, when that is sent out, to have a look at that, and again, make an informed decision help you to make an informed decision about where it's best to send your son or daughter. If you've got any really questions that you think haven't been answered on this webinar or anything else, please contact us on the email address that you can see that's just been put up there on their contact@stmichaels.college.org.uk. And I would also urge you, if you want to kind of, not just us, but any school that you're interested in, have a look on our Twitter feed and their Twitter feed, just to see, that will give you some latest updates about what we're doing in the school in terms of kind of house competitions, assemblies, work we're doing with outside organisations. So please make sure to have a look at that again when you've got time. I would like to kind of end this presentation by saying thank you for joining us this afternoon. As I said, I hope that's been useful, and we look forward to working with you if you do decide to choose St Michael's as your school of choice for your son or daughter over the next few months, and obviously in September. Have a lovely afternoon, and thank you for joining us.